Okay, so I'm looking at number 2 now. So for number 2, let's first go ahead and multiply it out. So y is equal to negative 13 times x plus 6 times x plus 6 minus 1. So that means y is equal to negative 13 times x squared plus 12x plus 36 minus 1. And so y is equal to negative 13x squared. Oops, I didn't mean to put that parentheses. Negative 13x squared plus, that is 13 times 12, which is not plus, but minus 156. And then 13 times 36. Losing my mouth, okay. Plus 468 minus 1. Sorry, that's off the screen. I see. Minus 468 minus 1. So we have y equals negative 13x squared. And this needs an x. Minus 156x minus 469. So a is negative 13, b is negative 156, and c is negative 469. Big numbers. Big numbers, big numbers. All right, so I'm gonna just put a line through this because we're not using this right now. Okay, so for my axis of symmetry, that's going to be x equals negative b over 2a. So that's going to be 156 over 2 times negative 13. Because 156 is negative, so it has to be negative b, so that makes it positive. So that's going to be 156 divided by 26. So that's going to give us negative 6. So x is equal to negative 6. I'm going to put a box around that because that's information that we need later. All right? So right here, this is my value for a. So a is equal to negative 13, which means that a is less than 0, which means that my parabola is going to open down. If it opens down, then that means I have a maximum. All right. So the x value is negative 6. So that means I need to find the y value. I'm going to put that up here. So it's going to be y equals negative 13 times negative 6 squared minus 156 times negative 6 minus 469. Okay, so negative 6 squared is 36. So that's going to be 36 times negative 13, which is negative 468. 156 times 6 is going to be plus 936 minus 469. So I'm going to put that all in my calculator. Negative 468. If I could clear it out. Negative 468 plus 936 minus 469 leaves me with y equal to -1. So here's my y value. So my vertex is -6, -1. So the opposite of this 6, then this -1. So that works out. So I've got my vertex. I'm going to check that off. Got my axis of symmetry, x equals 6. What's my y-intercept? It's going to be C. So that's -469. Does it have a minimum or a maximum? We said it had a maximum. We need the domain. What's the domain for all quadratics? From -infinity to infinity. And then what's the range? Well, I have a maximum, so my maximum is -1, so that means -1 is going to be in the y, and it's going to go to -infinity. So I got my domain, I got my range, and then here, let's try that again. That's a horrible box, but that is my standard form. This. Sorry about that, y'all. And dang it, all my annotations went away. Sorry, guys. It's recorded though, so you can watch the recording. Sorry, that was totally an accident. And I will post the recording after class. My apologies on that one. I just tapped the wrong button. Okay, so I guess that means we just got to go on with our lesson for today. And after you watch the recording, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so today we are completing the square. Go ahead and set up your notes for today. Okay, we got it? Okay, so today we're talking about completing the square. Our essential question is completing the square. Completing the square is another method that you can use in order to solve a quadratic. So remember last time we looked at being able to solve a quadratic by factoring, and we looked at being able to solve a quadratic by using quadratic formula. But then when we listed the different ways to solve a quadratic, we also talked about being able to complete the square and being able to use the square root function, okay? Well, these completing the square and square root function pretty much go together. So we're focusing on completing the square, but in order to complete a quadratic, we have to complete the square, then use the square root, and so they will work together, okay? Okay, so the first thing is you gotta write down how to complete the square. So write the steps down so that we can reference these steps as we go through and actually do the steps. So write the steps down, then we will talk about applying the steps. Okay, so first we need to identify A, B, and C. We already know that. If A doesn't equal 1, we have to factor it out because we need A to always be 1. Then we need to move C to the other side of the equal sign, calculate B over 2A squared, add that value to both sides, factor each side, and then make the function equal to 0, or we can solve. So number 6 is kind of depends on what we're doing. It could either be make the function equal to 0, or it could be solve the equation, okay? All right, so before we start actually solving, we need to make sure that we know how to find the third term. So in this particular case, we have x squared plus 6x plus c. We need to find c. Okay, so we already know that A is equal to 1. So A equals 1 and B is equal to 6. We need to find C, right? Okay. So in order to find C, that's where we're going to take B over 2 and square it. So C is equal to B over 2 squared. Okay. So that's going to be 6 over 2, which is 3. Then we're going to take that 3 and square it, which is 9. Right? So C is equal to 9. Okay, so then we have x squared plus 6x plus 9. Well, what's so special about this? Why do we want to get this 9? What's the purpose of completing the square? Very simple. Our goal is to create a perfect square trinomial. Our goal is to create a perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. And so what that means is we can now take this x squared plus 6x plus 9 and we can factor it. And when we factor it, it's going to become a perfect square. So what number multiplies to give you 9 and adds to give you 6? What numbers multiply to give you 9 and add to give you 6? 3 and 3. So that means that we would essentially have x plus 3 times x plus 3, right? How can we rewrite x plus 3 times x plus 3? X plus 3 squared. This, my friends, is a perfect square trinomial. And does this look familiar? Definitely saw it in that last problem, right? So this is where we're trying to get, okay? Because then if we have something like this, it's going to be easy to solve because we can solve using the square root method. So our goal is to be able to get this perfect square trinomial so we can use the square root method to solve, okay? All right, let's go to the next one. Can I clear this out? Yeah? Come on. Clear this out. Go to the next problem. All right, so m squared minus 12m plus c. What is the value of c? So we know that a is equal to 1, and that's what we need. B is equal to negative 12, and we need to find C. So remember, C is equal to B over 2 squared. So that's going to be negative 12 over 2, and we're going to square it. So negative 12 over 2 is negative 6, and negative 6 squared is 36. So C is equal to 36. And just as an FYI, your C is always going to be positive because any number squared is always positive. So we have A, B, and C. So that means we have m squared minus 12m plus 36, and we need to factor it. Because remember, we need that perfect square. Now, I'm going to show you something. When you factor, you really don't have to factor. Like you should factor, but here's a hint. When you take b and divide it by 2, whatever number you get, that's going to be what you have when you factor. So when we took b and divided it by 2, we got negative 6, right? So when we factor, we're going to have m minus 6 squared. So this negative 6 here is the same as this negative 6 here. Right. So if you remember in the last one was x squared plus 6x, right? Mm-hmm. And then we were trying to figure out c. We did 6 divided by 2. We got 3. Then we squared it. We got 9, right? So that gave us x squared plus 6x plus 9. And when we factor, we got x plus 3 squared. This 3 is the same as this 3 here. Okay? So once you divide by 2, whatever number you get, that's what it's going to factor to. Okay? Questions? Okay, so do we have it in our mind how to get C? Do you have any questions about getting C? Okay, so now that we know how to get C, now we can solve some equations. All right. So our first equation says x squared plus 10x minus 11 equals 0. Okay. So I need to, let me pull up the words that you have so I can compare the words and you can see the steps. Because I know the steps, but I want to make sure that I'm saying what you see. Okay, it says identify A, B, and C. So let's get something we can write with. A is equal to 1. B is equal to negative 10, positive 10. I know we've got negative sign. And C is equal to negative 11. We're good? It says if A does not equal 1, factor out A. A equals 1, so we're good. Step number 2, move C to the other side of the equal sign. So this is minus 11, so we're going to add 11 on both sides. So we have x squared plus 10x equals 11. So far, so good? Next step, calculate b over 2 squared. So that's going to be b over 2 squared is going to be 10 over 2, which is 5 squared, and 5 squared is 25. So our C we know is 25, right? So I'm going to put plus 25 right here because that's my new C. Yes? Makes sense. I don't want to keep going if it doesn't. Yes? Okay. Now, remember the rule for an equation. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other, right? So if I added 25 on the left, I also have to add 25 on the right because our equation has to stay balanced. If we put something on the left, then we have to put it on the right, okay? So I added 25 on the left, I added 25 on the right. Next step says, add the value to both sides. We did that. Okay, next step, factor one side, simplify the other. So x squared plus 10x plus 25 creates a perfect square. When I divide 10 by 2, I got 5. So that means on the left side, I have x plus 5 squared. Make sense? Okay. On the right side, that is going to be equal to 36. So far, so good. Okay, now, at this point, we have two options. Depends on what the directions will tell us. We've already completed the square, so we're good with that. But the directions next could say, solve for x, or the directions could say, write the equation in vertex form. Those are two options that we have, okay? So, I'm gonna put at the top, I'm gonna say, oh, here is option 1. So option 1 could say, write the equation in vertex form. Okay, and remember, in the video, did I talk about vertex form? X minus h plus k? I saw it, but I don't know. Okay, anyways, so vertex form is going to be y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, right? Okay, so we already have x plus 5 squared, but we don't have a plus k, we have it equal to 36. So we will really subtract 36 from both sides and get minus 36. And so that would give us our equation in vertex form. Okay, so this would be my equation in vertex form. Okay, that would be one option. Option number 2 would then say, solve for x. So at this point, if I wanted to take this and solve for x, then I would solve using the square root. Because I got a squared, how do you want to do a squared? You do the square root, right? So let's go ahead and solve it. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides, because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other, right? Square root and square are inverse operations. Square root and square are inverse operations. So they will essentially cancel each other out. So on the left side, I will be left with x plus 5. Okay. Square root and square are inverse operations. So if I take the square root of something, it's just like if I had plus, like I have plus 5, what's the inverse of plus 5? To undo the plus 5, I have to minus 5, right? Those are inverse operations. Multiplication and division are inverse operations. So if I square something, the inverse of squaring it is taking the square root. So one will undo the other. So I have to take the square root of both sides to get rid of this squared. So then I'm left with x plus 5. Okay. And what is the square root of 6? 30. What is the square root of 36? 6, but it could be a positive 6 or it could be a negative 6, right? Because positive 6 squared is 36, and negative 6 squared is also 36. So you have to make sure that you write plus 36, plus 6 and minus 6, so plus or minus 6. Okay? Make sense? Okay. Then we just solve for x, so we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. Okay, so now remember, when I have plus or minus, that really means that I'm going to do two equations. So on the left side, I have x equals. And then on the right side, I'm going to have this negative 5 plus 6, because that's my plus part. And I'm also going to have negative 5 minus 6. So that's the plus or minus. Because remember, it makes two equations. So negative 5 plus 6 is 1. And negative 5 minus 6 is negative 11. So x can be 1 or x can be negative 11, which, guys, remember, a quadratic can have at most two equations. Okay? So I have two answers. My two answers are x is equal to 1 and x is equal to negative 11. And I'm going to show you something real quick for this particular problem that we can use to check. Okay? Now, it's only on this problem, and I did this intentionally. This x squared plus 10x minus 11 can be factored. Okay? So if I factored it, I would get x minus 1, x plus 11. So normally you wouldn't be able to factor, but I wanted to pick the problem that you would be able to factor so you can get some nice numbers and so that you could easily check your work. Okay? So x equals 1, x equals negative 11. Okay? Any questions? Any questions over here on the computer? Okay, let's do another one. That was super fast. Mm-hmm. All right, second one. X squared minus 4x plus 2 is equal to 0. X squared minus 4x plus 2 is equal to 0. I'm actually going to give you about 2 minutes to try to do this one on your own, and then we'll do it together. So follow the steps, and then we'll do it together. All right, let's try it. Because this one, in the end, it ends up being a little bit tricky, right? Okay, so a is equal to 1. Oops. My pen to right. All right, so a is equal to 1. B is equal to negative 4, and C is equal to 2, right? So we're good there. Okay, so we need to move the 2 to the other side, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. I don't know what that is, y'all. So we have x squared minus 4x equals negative 2. Y'all, what am I doing? All right. Okay, so then we need to do b over 2 squared, which is going to be negative 4 over 2. And we're going to square it. So negative 4 over 2 is negative 2. And negative 2 squared is a positive 4. Right. So we're going to take this 4 and add it on both sides. So we have on the left side, we have x squared minus 4x plus 4. On the right side, negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Then this x squared minus 4x plus 4 can be factored. We're going to use this negative 2 here. So that's going to be x minus 2 squared is equal to 2. All right? And so now we want to solve for x. So in order to solve, we're going to use the square root method. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. So now we have x minus 2, because the square and the square root cancel, is equal to plus or minus the square root of 2. The square root of 2 is some decimal. So we're just going to leave it as the square root of 2. Okay. And then we're going to add 2 on both sides. So then our answer, remember we need two answers, right? So our two answers are going to be 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. All right, 2, because it's a positive 2, plus or minus the square root of 2. So you can leave it like this, or you could write 2 plus the square root of 2 and 2 minus the square root of 2. Either way, they're both the same thing, doesn't matter. But you want to leave it as a square root of 2, unless the problem specifically says round to this many decimal places, then you just leave it written as a square root of 2 because that's going to be your most exact answer. Okay? Make sense? Any questions? Okay, we're going to do one more. Yes. Huh? Yeah, take your time. We're going to do one more because we need to do one where A is not equal to 1. Last one for today. All right, so here we have negative 20 equals 2x squared plus 12x, right? So first, I need to make it equal to 0 so that I can identify my A, B, and C. So I'm going to add 20 on both sides. And some people might think this is crazy because in the end, we're going to really move the 20 back, but it makes sense, trust me. So I'm going to add 20 on both sides so that I get 0 is equal to 2x squared plus 12x plus 20. I have A is equal to 2, B is equal to 12, and C is equal to 20. That should be a 20. But I need my A to be equal to 1, right? So I'm going to factor out a 2. So 0 then is going to be equal to 2 times x squared plus 6x plus 10. So when I complete the square this time, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm actually not going to move the 10 because it's inside of that parentheses. It's working with that too, so I'm going to leave it alone. Okay? All right, so I'm going to say my B is still equal to 6. That hasn't changed. So I'm going to do 6 over 2 squared, which is going to be 3 squared, which is 9, right? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this 2, and I'm going to say x squared plus 6x, right? And then I'm going to do plus 9. I'm going to close my parentheses. Okay? Then I can't forget that I still have this plus 10, right? So I'm going to keep my plus 10. And then, remember I added 9? But there's this 2 right here, so I'm going to subtract, because I added 9, I'm going to subtract 18. But I feel like that might confuse you. Let me do it a different way. At this step right here, because I don't want to confuse you even more. At this step right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides. I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. Okay. So 0 divided by 2 is 0. And then those 2's will cancel. So I have x squared plus 6x plus 10. Now it looks like a problem we already know how to do, right? And I can subtract 10 from both sides. So I have negative 10 is equal to x squared plus 6x. And I already did this b over 2 squared, and I got 9. So I'm going to add 9 over here. And I'm going to add 9 over here. I might have space down here. So on the left side, negative 10 plus 9 is negative 1. And then x squared plus 6x plus 9, I'm using this 3 right here. Factors 2x plus 3 squared. Now, if I wanted to solve this problem, I can't yet. Because my first thing, in order to solve it, I would take the square root of both sides, right? But can I take the square root of a negative? Not today. Today is Wednesday. Not today, but on Friday, you will be able to. So this particular problem, we're going to stop right here because you haven't learned how to take the square root of negative. But on Friday, we will talk about what you need to do to take the square root of a negative so we can actually finish this problem. Okay? Questions? All right, so what I'm going to do is stop the video first, stop the recording.